The night was still resting over the land. A wide blanket of darkness covered the fields, the forests, and the winding paths that crossed the countryside. Far above, small stars hung quietly in the sky. They seemed almost motionless, shining softly over a world that had not yet awakened. On a gentle hill stood a monastery. Its stone walls appeared gray beneath the moonlight. The buildings were simple and sturdy. They had been standing there for many years. Wind and rain had touched every stone. Seasons had come and gone around them. Snow had settled on their roofs. Summer sunlight had warmed their walls. Yet the monastery remained. Quiet. Steady. Patient. Around the monastery stretched open land. There were gardens, orchards, and fields. A small stream flowed nearby. During the daytime its water sparkled beneath the sun. But now, in the darkness before dawn, it could only be heard. The soft sound of moving water drifted through the cool air. Everything else was calm. Most of the people inside the monastery were asleep. The monks rested in a long sleeping hall. Their beds were simple. Wooden frames stood beside one another in neat rows. Blankets of wool provided warmth during cold nights. The room held no unnecessary decorations. The silence inside was deep. Only the occasional sound of breathing could be heard. Some monks slept lightly. Others slept heavily after a long day of labor. Their days followed a rhythm that rarely changed. The rhythm was older than many of the men themselves. It had guided generations of monks. Every day unfolded in almost the same way. Prayer. Work. Study. Silence. Rest. Then the cycle began again. Outside, the wind moved gently through nearby trees. Leaves rustled softly. The scent of damp earth filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once before becoming silent again. The monastery seemed completely at peace. But morning was already approaching. Far beyond the horizon, the first hints of dawn slowly prepared to arrive. No one could see them yet. The darkness remained. Still, time continued moving forward. Inside the monastery, one monk opened his eyes. His name was Brother Matthew. He was not young. He was not old. His hair had begun to turn gray around the edges. Years of work had strengthened his hands. His face carried the calm expression often seen among those who spent much of their lives in quiet reflection. For a moment he remained still beneath his blanket. The sleeping hall was cold. Very cold. Stone buildings often held the chill of the night. Brother Matthew could feel it immediately. He listened carefully. Silence. The monastery still slept. Yet he knew the bell would ring soon. It always did. Every morning. Every season. Every year. The bell never forgot. Slowly, he sat upright. The wooden bed creaked softly. Nearby, another monk shifted slightly but remained asleep. Brother Matthew folded his blanket carefully. Everything inside the monastery had its place. Order was important. Small habits mattered. Even simple tasks were performed with care. He stood and placed his feet upon the cold floor. The stone beneath him felt almost icy. For a moment he shivered. Then he smiled faintly. Cold mornings were nothing new. He had experienced thousands of them. After dressing quietly, he stepped toward a narrow window. Moonlight filtered through the opening. Outside, darkness still covered the landscape. The outlines of trees could barely be seen. A thin mist floated above the fields. The world appeared soft and dreamlike. Brother Matthew watched for a few moments. Then he turned away. Soon the day would begin. A new day. And yet a day very much like countless others before it. That familiarity brought comfort. Life inside the monastery was not filled with surprises. It moved gently, predictably, like water flowing through a familiar stream. Across the sleeping hall, a few more monks slowly began to wake. Nobody spoke. Words were used carefully here. Silence was considered valuable. Not because conversation was forbidden, but because quietness allowed the mind to settle. It allowed attention to rest upon simple things. The sound of breathing. The feeling of footsteps. The movement of light. The passing of time. Many monks believed silence revealed details that busy people often missed. And so, even before dawn, the sleeping hall remained peaceful. A few men dressed. A few stretched stiff muscles. Others sat quietly beside their beds. Then it happened. From somewhere within the monastery came a deep sound. The bell. One slow note rolled through the darkness. Then another. Then another. Its voice spread across the monastery grounds. The sound drifted through hallways. Across courtyards. Over gardens. Across fields. The bell announced the beginning of another day. No monk hurried. There was no need. The bell was not a command shouted in urgency. It was more like an invitation. A familiar reminder. Time to rise. Time to begin. Brother Matthew stepped into a corridor illuminated by a few small oil lamps. Their flames flickered gently. Shadows danced across stone walls. Other monks emerged from nearby rooms. They moved quietly through the hallways. Their robes brushed softly against the floor. Nobody seemed fully awake yet. The world outside remained dark. The world inside remained calm. Together they walked toward the church. Their footsteps echoed lightly. Stone arches stretched overhead. Cold air lingered in every corner. The monastery felt ancient during these early hours. As if the building itself were still sleeping. When Brother Matthew entered the church, darkness greeted him. A few candles glowed near the front. Their small flames provided warm points of light. Rows of wooden seats stood quietly in the shadows. The air carried the faint scent of wax and old wood. Brother Matthew took his place. Around him, other monks did the same. One by one they arrived. One by one they settled into silence. Outside, the stars continued shining. Inside, the monastery prepared for prayer. No grand speeches were made. No excitement filled the room. Only stillness. The kind of stillness that grows naturally when people gather before sunrise. The kind that feels deep and comforting. For several moments nobody moved. Then the first prayers began. Soft voices rose gently through the darkness. The words flowed slowly. Steadily. Like a quiet river. The sound filled the church without disturbing its peace. Brother Matthew listened carefully. He had heard these prayers many times. Thousands of times. Yet familiarity did not make them meaningless. In some ways, repetition made them richer. The same words carried different feelings on different mornings. Some mornings brought energy. Some brought tiredness. Some brought reflection. Today brought calm. The voices continued. Outside, dawn slowly moved closer. The eastern horizon began showing the faintest hint of gray. Night was beginning to loosen its grip upon the land. A new day waited patiently beyond the darkness. And within the monastery, the monks continued praying, unaware that the first pale light of morning had already started touching the distant edges of the world. The day had begun, and many quiet hours still lay ahead. The prayers continued in the quiet church. Soft voices rose and fell like a gentle breeze moving through tall grass. No one hurried through the familiar words. There was no need to rush. The darkness outside still lingered over the land, and the monastery remained wrapped in the peaceful silence of the early morning. Brother Matthew sat with his hands folded. The faint glow of candles illuminated the nearby stone walls. Their light was warm and steady. Small shadows stretched across the floor and disappeared into the darkness above. The church felt very old. Generations of monks had sat in this same place. Many had lived entire lives within these walls. They had walked the same corridors, prayed the same prayers, worked in the same gardens, watched the same sunrise spread across the fields. Now their footsteps were long gone. Yet traces of their lives seemed to remain. The monastery carried memories within its stones. As the prayers continued, a faint gray light began to appear through the narrow windows. At first it was almost impossible to notice. The darkness simply became a little softer. The shadows lost some of their depth. The outlines of wooden benches became easier to see. Slowly, very slowly, night gave way to morning. Outside, the sky brightened by small degrees. The stars faded one after another. The moon lowered toward the horizon. Mist drifted above the fields beyond the monastery walls. The world seemed to awaken carefully, as though it did not wish to disturb the quiet. Inside the church, the monks remained focused. Their voices blended together in a calm rhythm. Brother Matthew felt the familiar comfort of routine. For many years his life had followed this pattern. The same early bell. The same walk through cold hallways. The same prayers before sunrise. Some people might have found such repetition dull. But to Brother Matthew, it felt peaceful. Each day carried small differences. A different breeze. A different cloud. A different bird singing outside a window. Even familiar routines contained endless tiny changes. When the prayers finally came to an end, silence returned. No one stood immediately. No one rushed toward the door. The monks simply remained seated for a few moments. The stillness settled gently around them. Outside, a bird began to sing. Its voice floated through an open window. A second bird answered from somewhere farther away. Morning was arriving. At last the monks rose. Their movements were slow and quiet. Brother Matthew stepped into the aisle and joined the others. Together they left the church. The corridor outside seemed brighter now. The oil lamps still burned, but their light was no longer needed as much. Daylight was beginning to enter the building. The stone floor reflected the pale morning glow. As Brother Matthew walked through the hallway, he noticed the familiar scent of fresh bread. A baker had already been working. The monastery kitchen was awake. The smell drifted through the corridors and mixed with the cool air. It was a simple scent. Yet it brought a feeling of warmth. The monks would soon eat their first meal of the day. But before breakfast, there were small tasks to complete. Every monk had responsibilities. The monastery functioned because everyone contributed. Some cared for the gardens. Some copied books. Some repaired tools. Some worked in the kitchen. Others tended animals. No task was considered unimportant. Even the smallest duty helped support the community. Brother Matthew's work often involved the library. He spent many hours among books and manuscripts. He enjoyed the quiet there. The smell of parchment and ink had become familiar companions. But those duties would come later. For now, the morning was only beginning. He stepped into a small courtyard. The fresh air greeted him immediately. It felt cool against his face. Above him, the sky had turned a pale shade of blue. The first rays of sunlight touched the highest branches of nearby trees. Drops of dew covered the grass. Tiny beads of moisture sparkled softly. The monastery looked different in daylight. The dark shapes of night had disappeared. Stone walls now revealed their texture. Wooden doors showed signs of age and wear. The gardens emerged from the shadows. Rows of herbs stretched neatly beside narrow paths. Brother Matthew paused for a moment. He enjoyed this time of day. Everything felt calm. The world seemed balanced between sleep and activity. The busier hours had not yet arrived. The fields beyond the monastery remained silent. The nearby stream continued its steady song. Thin mist drifted above the water. For a few moments, Brother Matthew simply listened. The sound of birds. The sound of water. The distant movement of wind through leaves. These sounds never demanded attention. They simply existed. Gentle and constant. Nearby, another monk crossed the courtyard carrying a wooden bucket. Brother Thomas was younger. His steps were energetic despite the early hour. A smile appeared briefly as he passed. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. The quiet itself felt comfortable. The monastery encouraged such moments. Not every silence needed to be filled. Soon a second bell rang. This one was smaller. Its sound echoed lightly through the courtyard. Breakfast time. The monks slowly made their way toward the dining hall. Brother Matthew joined them. The hall was long and simple. Wooden tables stood in neat rows. Sunlight entered through narrow windows and stretched across the floor. The room smelled of bread, oats, and warm soup. Several monks were already serving the meal. Steam rose from large bowls. Fresh loaves rested upon wooden boards. Everything was modest. Nothing extravagant. Yet it was enough. The monks took their seats. Before eating, they paused briefly. Then breakfast began. The meal was quiet. A few monasteries allowed reading during meals, and this one followed that tradition. At the front of the hall, an older monk opened a book. His voice was calm and steady. As the others ate, he read aloud. The words flowed gently through the room. Brother Matthew listened while breaking a piece of bread. The bread was warm. Its crust crackled softly. The simple food tasted comforting after the cold morning. A bowl of porridge sat before him. Steam curled upward in thin ribbons. Outside the windows, sunlight continued spreading across the land. The fields brightened. The mist slowly disappeared. The day was unfolding. One small moment at a time. One quiet task after another. As breakfast continued, the monastery gradually came alive. Doors opened. Footsteps crossed courtyards. Workers prepared tools. Gardeners gathered baskets. The rhythm of daily life began to move forward. Yet even now, everything remained peaceful. There was activity, but not noise. Movement, but not hurry. The monastery lived according to a slower rhythm than the outside world. A rhythm shaped by prayer, work, and patience. Brother Matthew finished his meal. Soon he would walk toward the library. There, among shelves of precious books, another part of the day awaited him. The morning sun now rested fully upon the monastery walls. The shadows grew shorter. Birds filled the air with song. And somewhere nearby, a gentle breeze moved through the herb garden, carrying the scent of rosemary and thyme across the quiet grounds. The day had truly begun. And many peaceful hours still stretched ahead. Breakfast slowly came to an end. Wooden bowls were emptied. Small pieces of bread disappeared from the tables. The voice of the reader continued for a little while longer before finally becoming silent. The monks rose calmly from their seats. Some carried dishes toward the kitchen. Others headed toward workshops, gardens, and storerooms. The monastery was now fully awake. Yet even in its busiest moments, it never felt hurried. The pace of life remained steady, measured, peaceful. Brother Matthew stepped outside once more. The morning sun had climbed a little higher into the sky. Its gentle light touched the stone walls and warmed the cool air. The courtyard looked fresh and clean. Tiny drops of dew still rested on some of the grass, though many had already vanished beneath the growing sunlight. A few monks crossed the open space carrying baskets. One carried a bundle of firewood. Another pushed a small cart loaded with vegetables harvested the day before. Each person moved with purpose. No one wasted energy. Yet no one seemed rushed. The rhythm of work unfolded naturally. Brother Matthew followed a narrow stone path. His destination stood on the eastern side of the monastery. The library? It was one of his favorite places. The building itself was not large. Its walls were thick. Its windows were narrow. Its wooden door showed signs of many years of use. Countless hands had opened that door. Countless footsteps had crossed its threshold. Brother Matthew reached the entrance and paused briefly. The smell met him immediately. Old parchment. Ink. Wood. Leather. It was a scent he had known for years. A scent that felt almost like home. He stepped inside. The room was quiet. Very quiet. Rows of shelves lined the walls. Books rested carefully upon them. Some were large and heavy. Others were smaller and easier to carry. Every book represented many hours of labor. Nothing here had been produced quickly. Every page had required patience. Every word had been written by hand. Sunlight entered through tall windows and spread across the room in long golden beams. Dust floated through the light. Tiny particles drifted slowly through the air. They seemed almost motionless. Near the center of the room stood several wooden desks. A few monks were already seated there. Each worked silently. One carefully copied words from an older manuscript. Another repaired a damaged book. A third mixed fresh ink. The scratching sound of quills occasionally broke the silence. Soft. Gentle. Rhythmic. Brother Matthew smiled faintly. He always loved this sound. It was the sound of knowledge being preserved. The sound of patience. The sound of careful hands moving across parchment. He walked toward his desk. The wood was smooth from years of use. A small window nearby allowed sunlight to fall directly across the workspace. This made reading easier. On the desk rested a manuscript he had been copying for several weeks. Its pages contained religious writings. The letters were neat and beautiful. Each line required concentration. Mistakes were difficult to correct. That was why scribes worked slowly. Very slowly. Brother Matthew sat down. For a moment he simply looked at the pages. The room around him felt calm. Outside, birds sang in the distance. Inside, only the occasional scratch of a quill could be heard. He reached for his pen. Then he began working. One letter. Then another. Then another. The process was almost meditative. His hand moved carefully across the page. The ink flowed smoothly. The words appeared one by one. There was no rushing. No pressure. Only steady progress. Hours could pass this way. Many people today might find such work difficult. But the monks often found comfort in it. Copying texts required attention. It encouraged patience. The mind focused on a single task. Everything else faded into the background. Brother Matthew enjoyed that feeling. The world became very small. Just the parchment, the ink, the words, and the quiet room around him. Sunlight gradually shifted across the floor. The morning advanced. Outside the windows, the monastery grounds grew brighter. Gardeners worked among rows of herbs. Workers crossed the courtyards. The sounds remained distant and soft. Inside the library, the atmosphere barely changed. It remained cool, still, peaceful. After some time, Brother Matthew paused to rest his hand. He looked toward a nearby shelf. Many books rested there. Some were centuries old. Their pages had yellowed with age. Their bindings showed signs of wear. Yet they remained valuable. Every book represented knowledge carried through generations. Stories, prayers, observations, ideas. Without careful preservation, many of those writings could have disappeared forever. The monks understood this. That understanding gave purpose to their work. Brother Matthew rose from his chair and walked toward one of the shelves. His footsteps echoed softly. He selected a large volume bound in dark leather. The cover felt rough beneath his fingers. When he opened it, the pages released a faint earthy scent. The handwriting inside belonged to a monk who had lived many years earlier. Perhaps long before Brother Matthew had even been born. Yet here were his words. Still visible. Still speaking quietly across time. Brother Matthew often found comfort in that thought. People came and went. Seasons changed. Years passed. But careful work could leave something behind. Something gentle. Something lasting. He returned the book to its place. Then he walked toward a window. Outside, the garden stretched beneath the sunlight. Rows of sage, thyme, rosemary, and lavender filled the air with fragrance. Several monks worked among them. One knelt beside a patch of herbs, carefully removing weeds. Another carried a basket. The scene felt peaceful. The entire monastery seemed to move according to one shared rhythm. Different tasks. Different responsibilities. Yet all connected. The baker kneading dough. The gardener tending plants. The scribe copying books. The cook preparing meals. Each person contributed something. No task stood alone. Brother Matthew watched for a moment longer. Then he returned to his desk. More work awaited him. The manuscript lay open where he had left it. The unfinished page waited patiently. He dipped the quill into fresh ink. The dark liquid glistened briefly in the sunlight. Then he continued writing. Line after line. Word after word. The room remained silent. The hours passed gently. Outside, the morning slowly approached midday. The sun climbed higher. Shadows shifted. The air grew warmer. And inside the library, the quiet scratching of quills continued, preserving thoughts and stories that would outlive everyone currently sitting in the room. For Brother Matthew, it was another ordinary morning. And that was exactly what made it beautiful. Nothing dramatic happened. No great event disturbed the peace. Only careful work, patient hands, and the steady movement of time. The kind of morning that could easily be forgotten by history. Yet it was mornings like these that truly filled the lives of most people. Simple hours, simple tasks, quiet moments, one after another, like drops of water flowing gently through a stream. And as the sunlight continued pouring through the windows, the monastery settled deeper into the calm rhythm of the day. The bell for midday was still some time away. For now, the library remained a world of parchment, ink, sunlight, and silence. A peaceful world hidden within ancient stone walls. The quiet scratching of quills continued in the library. Brother Matthew worked steadily. Line after line appeared upon the parchment. The sunlight slowly shifted across his desk as the morning advanced. Nothing seemed hurried. Nothing seemed demanding. Only the gentle passage of time. After several hours, Brother Matthew carefully placed his quill aside. His fingers were slightly stained with ink. This was common among the scribes. Tiny marks of their daily labor often remained upon their hands. He stretched slowly. The muscles in his shoulders relaxed. Then he rose from his chair. The library remained peaceful. Several other monks continued working. One was still bent over a manuscript. Another carefully organized books upon a shelf. A third examined a damaged page that needed repair. Each task unfolded quietly. Brother Matthew nodded politely to a nearby scribe before making his way toward the door. Outside, the monastery grounds glowed beneath the late morning sun. The sky was clear. Only a few thin clouds drifted lazily across the blue expanse overhead. The coolness of dawn had almost disappeared. Warmth now rested upon the earth. Birds moved among the trees. Bees drifted from flower to flower. The entire monastery seemed alive in a gentle and peaceful way. Brother Matthew followed a stone path toward the herb garden. The scent reached him before he arrived. Rosemary, sage, mint, lavender. Many different fragrances blended together in the air. The smell was fresh and comforting. The herb garden occupied a sunny corner of the monastery grounds. Low stone borders divided the garden into neat sections. Narrow paths wound between rows of carefully tended plants. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. For centuries, monasteries often grew herbs. Some were used in cooking. Others were used for medicine. Many served both purposes. The monks learned which plants could ease a cough, which could calm an upset stomach, which could flavor a simple meal. This knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Brother Matthew stepped through the garden gate. The wooden latch clicked softly behind him. Several monks were already at work. Brother Thomas knelt beside a patch of sage. His hands moved carefully as he removed small weeds from the soil. Nearby, an older monk carried a basket filled with freshly cut herbs. No one spoke. The quiet felt natural. The sounds of the garden were enough. The buzzing of insects. The rustle of leaves. The distant song of birds. Brother Matthew walked slowly along one of the paths. Sunlight illuminated the plants. Tiny drops of moisture still lingered in shaded areas. The leaves glowed in shades of green and silver. Some herbs were tall. Others remained close to the ground. Each variety possessed its own appearance, its own scent, its own purpose. He paused beside a patch of lavender. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Their fragrance filled the air. It was easy to understand why many people found lavender calming. Even here, Hundreds of years ago, its scent brought comfort. Brother Matthew reached out and gently touched one of the blossoms. The stem moved softly beneath his fingers. Then he continued walking. The garden was not large. Yet it felt peaceful in a way that made it seem larger than it truly was. Perhaps it was because every part of it received careful attention. Nothing was neglected. Nothing was rushed. The monks understood that plants required patience. Seeds did not grow overnight. Roots developed slowly. Leaves unfolded at their own pace. The garden encouraged the same patience within those who cared for it. At the far edge of the garden stood a small wooden shed. Tools rested neatly inside. Rakes, shovels, baskets. Simple objects worn smooth through years of use. Brother Matthew stepped inside briefly. The scent of wood and earth filled the small building. Sunlight entered through narrow cracks between the boards. Tiny beams of light crossed the dusty interior. He selected a small hand tool. One section of the garden needed attention. The soil there had become compacted. Loosening it would help the plants continue growing well. Returning outside, he found an empty section beside a row of medicinal herbs. Then he began working. The task was simple. The soil was soft from recent rain. His movements were steady and unhurried. The earth crumbled easily beneath the tool. Occasionally he paused to remove a stone or pull a small weed. The work required little thought. That was part of its appeal. The mind could settle into a comfortable rhythm. The body moved. The hands worked. The world continued around him. For a long while, nothing else demanded attention. Above, clouds drifted slowly across the sky. A butterfly landed briefly upon a flower. A bee moved between blossoms collecting nectar. The garden seemed to exist in its own peaceful world. Beyond the monastery walls, farmers worked in distant fields. Travelers followed country roads. Villages slowly awakened to their own daily routines. Yet here inside the monastery, life moved gently forward. Hour by hour. Task by task. Brother Matthew often appreciated the separation from the outside world. Not because the world beyond was bad. Simply because the monastery offered something different. A quieter rhythm. A slower pace. A chance to focus upon simple things. The feel of soil. The scent of herbs. The sound of wind moving through leaves. These small details often went unnoticed by busy people. Yet they filled much of daily life within the monastery. Eventually Brother Thomas approached carrying a basket. Fresh rosemary overflowed from the top. Its scent drifted through the warm air. Brother Matthew glanced up. The younger monk smiled briefly. Again, no words were necessary. Both men returned to their work. The silence felt comfortable rather than empty. Time continued passing. The sun climbed higher. Shadows grew shorter. The warmth of the day increased. Soon the monastery bell would ring again. Midday approached. The monks would gather for prayer once more before sharing the midday meal. But for now, the garden remained peaceful. A place of sunlight and fragrance. A place where work unfolded slowly and naturally. Brother Matthew finished loosening the soil and stood. He brushed dirt from his hands. Nearby, the lavender swayed gently in the breeze. The herbs seemed healthy. Strong. Content beneath the summer sun. For a moment he simply stood there. Listening. The monastery bells had not yet rung. The day felt suspended in a calm and quiet moment. Birdsong drifted from the orchard. Leaves rustled overhead. the distant stream continued its endless journey through the countryside. Everything felt balanced, simple, peaceful. Then, from somewhere within the monastery, a familiar sound finally echoed through the air. The bell. One deep note. Then another. Then another. Its voice rolled across the gardens and courtyards. Across the fields and trees. Across the quiet landscape surrounding the monastery. Midday had arrived. The morning was ending. A new portion of the day was about to begin. Brother Matthew set down his tool. Around him, the other monks did the same. Slowly, calmly, they began making their way back toward the monastery buildings. The herb garden settled into silence behind them. The bees continued their work. The flowers continued swaying. The sunlight continued shining. And the peaceful rhythm of monastery life moved gently onward. The sound of the bell drifted across the monastery grounds. Its deep voice rolled over the herb garden and echoed gently from the stone walls. For a few moments, the ringing seemed to linger in the warm air long after the bell itself had fallen silent. Brother Matthew stood quietly among the rows of herbs. The soil still clung to his hands. A faint scent of rosemary and lavender lingered around him. Nearby, Brother Thomas placed his basket upon the ground and straightened his back. The younger monk looked toward the church tower where the bell hung high above the monastery. Midday had arrived. The morning's work was finished. At least for now. The monks slowly gathered their tools. Nothing was rushed. Years of routine had taught them a steady pace. There was no need to hurry from one task to another. The day unfolded according to a rhythm older than any individual monk. A rhythm that guided them gently from prayer to work, from work to prayer once again. Brother Matthew carried a small basket toward the storage shed. After placing it carefully inside, he stepped back onto the garden path. The sun now stood high overhead. The coolness of dawn felt far away. Warm light filled every corner of the monastery grounds. The stone walls glowed softly. The leaves of the orchard trees shimmered in the breeze. Even the distant hills beyond the monastery seemed wrapped in golden sunlight. As he walked, Brother Matthew noticed a pair of sparrows hopping along the edge of a pathway. They pecked at the ground, searching for seeds. Neither bird seemed concerned by the passing monks. Life and routine surrounded them as naturally as sunlight. The path eventually led toward the cloister. This was one of the most peaceful places within the monastery. The cloister formed a square walkway surrounding a grassy courtyard. Stone arches lined each side. Shadows gathered beneath them, providing welcome relief from the midday sun. Brother Matthew entered the covered walkway. The temperature immediately felt cooler. The thick stone walls protected the area from heat and wind. Footsteps echoed softly beneath the arches. The sound was familiar, comforting. For centuries, monks had walked these same paths. Generations of quiet footsteps had worn smooth places into the stone floor. Brother Matthew often imagined the countless people who had passed through here before him. Some had lived long lives. Others had stayed only a few years. Many names had been forgotten. Yet their daily routines had once filled these halls. They too had heard bells. They too had walked beneath these arches. They too had paused to watch sunlight fall across the courtyard grass. The thought brought a gentle sense of connection. Life moved forward. People came and went. Yet certain things remained. The stone walls. The prayers. The rhythm of the day. The peace of the cloister. As he walked, sunlight filtered through the arches and created patterns across the floor. Bright shapes alternated with cool shadows. The effect changed slowly as the sun moved across the sky. Every hour brought a slightly different arrangement of light. Brother Matthew enjoyed noticing these small changes. Many people overlook such details. Yet life inside the monastery encouraged attention. Attention to weather. Attention to seasons. Attention to the movement of light and shadow. The simple act of noticing became part of daily life. Soon more monks entered the cloister. Some came from the gardens. Others arrived from workshops or storerooms. A few emerged from the library carrying folded manuscripts. Everyone moved toward the church. Midday prayer awaited. The church felt brighter than it had before dawn. Sunlight now streamed through the narrow windows. The stone interior glowed softly. Dust floated through beams of golden light. The candles still burned, but their flames seemed pale beside the brightness of the day. The monks took their places. Again, silence settled over the room. Brother Matthew sat and folded his hands. Outside, the world continued moving. Birds sang. The stream flowed. The wind stirred the trees. Inside, the church remained calm and still. Then the prayers began. Voices rose together. Slow. Measured. Gentle. The familiar words filled the space beneath the high ceiling. The sound seemed almost timeless. A visitor entering the church might have heard nearly the same prayers many decades earlier. Perhaps even centuries earlier. The continuity brought comfort. The prayers connected one day to the next. One generation to another. Brother Matthew listened carefully. The steady rhythm of the voices felt soothing. Like waves reaching a shore. Like rain falling softly upon a roof. No single voice stood out. The community prayed together. Each person contributing to a larger whole. When the prayers ended, silence returned once more. For a few moments no one moved. Then, slowly, the monks rose. The midday meal awaited. The dining hall felt warmer than it had during breakfast. Sunlight filled the room. The smell of fresh food drifted through the air. Simple meals were common in the monastery. Nothing extravagant. Nothing wasteful. Yet the food was nourishing and carefully prepared. Today there was bread. Vegetable stew. A small portion of cheese. And apples stored from an earlier harvest. The monks entered quietly and took their seats. As before, a reader stood at the front of the hall. A book rested open in his hands. When the meal began, his calm voice filled the room. The others ate while listening. Brother Matthew enjoyed these readings. They provided moments of reflection during the meal. The words flowed gently through the hall, blending with the soft sounds of eating. Wooden spoons touched bowls. Bread crusts cracked softly. The reader's voice continued. Outside the windows, sunlight brightened the courtyard. The day had reached its fullest point. The warmth of afternoon waited just beyond the walls. Brother Matthew tasted the stew. The vegetables had been grown nearby. Perhaps even in the very gardens he had walked through that morning. Life inside the monastery often worked this way. The monks planted seeds. They tended crops. They harvested food. Then they gathered together to share the results of their labor. The connection between work and daily life remained clear. Nothing felt distant. Everything seemed linked. The meal passed peacefully. When it ended, the monks offered thanks before rising from their seats. Some carried dishes toward the kitchen. Others prepared to return to their duties. Yet before afternoon work began, there was often a short period of quiet rest. Not sleep. Simply a pause. A brief space within the day. Brother Matthew stepped once more into the cloister. The shadows beneath the arches had grown deeper. A gentle breeze moved through the open courtyard. The grass in the center swayed softly. For a while, he walked slowly along the stone path. No destination. No urgency. Just a peaceful walk beneath the arches. A few monks sat on benches nearby. Some read. Some reflected quietly. Others simply enjoyed the shade. Occasionally a few words were exchanged. Soft conversations. Brief observations about the gardens or weather. Nothing loud. Nothing hurried. The monastery valued silence, but it did not reject companionship. Friendship existed here. It simply expressed itself gently. Brother Matthew paused beside one of the arches. From here he could see a section of the orchard beyond the courtyard wall. The leaves shimmered in the sunlight. A pair of birds moved among the branches. The afternoon stretched ahead. More work awaited. The library. The gardens. The workshops. The endless small tasks that kept monastery life moving smoothly. But those responsibilities could wait a little longer. For now, there was only the quiet shade. The soft breeze. The distant song of birds. And the peaceful feeling of a day unfolding exactly as it should. The bell would ring again in time. It always did. Until then, the monastery rested briefly beneath the warm midday sun, suspended between morning labor and afternoon work. And the calm rhythm of the day continued onward. The afternoon settled gently over the monastery. Warm sunlight rested upon the stone walls. The shadows beneath the cloister arches stretched a little farther across the ground. A soft breeze drifted through the courtyard, carrying the scent of grass, herbs, and distant trees. Brother Matthew remained beside one of the arches for a few quiet moments. The midday meal sat comfortably in his stomach. The warmth of the day encouraged stillness. Yet soon the afternoon work would begin. Across the monastery grounds, monks slowly returned to their duties. Some headed toward workshops. Others made their way to the fields. A few disappeared into storerooms and kitchens. The peaceful pause between labor and prayer was ending. The rhythm of the monastery moved forward once more. Brother Matthew stepped away from the cloister and followed a narrow path leading toward the orchard. The path wound along a low stone wall. Small wild flowers grew beside it. White blossoms. Yellow blossoms. Tiny patches of color scattered among the green grass. Bees moved lazily from flower to flower. Their gentle buzzing blended with the sounds of birds singing overhead. The orchard stood beyond the main monastery buildings. Rows of fruit trees stretched across a gently sloping piece of land. Some trees were old. Very old. Their trunks were thick and twisted. Their branches spread wide across the sky. Other trees were younger. Still growing. Still finding their place beneath the sun. The monks cared for all of them. Some produced apples. Others pears. A few plum trees stood near the far edge of the orchard. Their leaves shimmered whenever the breeze passed through. As Brother Matthew approached, the scent of fruit and leaves filled the air. The orchard possessed its own quiet atmosphere. Different from the herb garden. Different from the library. Yet equally peaceful. Sunlight filtered through countless leaves overhead. Small patches of brightness danced across the grass. Birds perched among the branches. Occasionally one would flutter from tree to tree before disappearing deeper into the orchard. Brother Matthew stepped beneath the shade of the nearest apple tree. The temperature felt slightly cooler here. The leaves provided welcome shelter from the afternoon sun. He paused and looked upward. Tiny green apples hung among the branches. The harvest was still some time away. The fruit needed more weeks to grow. More sunshine. More rain. Patience. Everything in the orchard required patience. Trees taught lessons slowly. A seed planted today might not provide fruit for many years. The monks understood this. They planted trees not only for themselves but for future generations. Some of the oldest trees in the orchard had been planted by monks who had lived long ago. Those men were gone now. Yet the trees remained. Their branches still offered shade. Their fruit still nourished the monastery. Brother Matthew often found comfort in that thought. A person could contribute something whose benefits might not be fully seen during his own lifetime. A tree was a simple example. Yet it carried a quiet wisdom. As he continued walking, he noticed Brother Andrew working nearby. The older monk stood beneath a pear tree with a wooden ladder resting against the trunk. Brother Andrew's beard had turned almost completely white over the years. His movements were slower than they once had been. But his eyes remained sharp. He knew the orchard better than anyone else in the monastery. For decades he had cared for these trees. He knew which branches produced the sweetest fruit, which areas received the most sunlight, which trees needed extra attention after harsh winters. Many younger monks learned from him. Not through long lectures. Mostly through observation. By watching. By helping. By spending quiet hours among the trees. Brother Andrew gently trimmed a small branch while Brother Matthew approached. The older monk glanced up and smiled warmly. The smile needed no words. It carried years of friendship and familiarity. Brother Matthew returned the smile before looking around the orchard. The afternoon sunlight created a beautiful scene. Leaves rustled softly overhead. Shadows moved gently across the grass. The distant monastery buildings could be seen between gaps in the trees. Their stone walls glowed in the sunlight. Everything appeared calm. Almost timeless. Brother Matthew picked up a small basket resting near the base of a tree. Several fallen branches lay scattered nearby. The recent winds had knocked them loose. Collecting them would help keep the orchard tidy. The task was simple. Perfect for a peaceful afternoon. He began walking slowly through the rows. Occasionally he bent to gather a fallen branch. Each one made a soft sound as it settled into the basket. The work required little effort. Little thought. His attention drifted naturally toward the world around him. A bird singing from somewhere above. A butterfly moving through a shaft of sunlight. The scent of warm grass. The texture of bark beneath his fingers when he steadied himself against a tree. These small details often became the true content of a monk's day. History sometimes focuses on kings, wars, battles, great events. But much of life has always consisted of quieter moments. Moments like this. Walking beneath fruit trees. Feeling the afternoon breeze. Completing simple tasks with steady hands. Brother Matthew moved deeper into the orchard. The sounds of the monastery faded slightly. The library. The workshops. The kitchens. All seemed farther away here. Only nature remained close. The leaves overhead whispered constantly. Never loudly. Never urgently. Just a soft rustling that seemed to continue without end. Eventually he reached a large apple tree near the center of the orchard. It was one of the oldest. Its trunk was broad and deeply furrowed. The bark carried countless marks left by time and weather. This tree had witnessed many seasons. Many harvests. Many winters. Perhaps generations of monks had rested beneath its branches. Brother Matthew set down his basket for a moment. The shade felt pleasant. The air smelled faintly of leaves and earth. A few apples hung overhead. Still small. Still growing. He sat on the grass. Just for a short while. The monastery did not encourage laziness. But neither did it demand constant motion. Periods of reflection held value too. The orchard was an ideal place for such moments. Brother Matthew leaned gently against the trunk. Above him, sunlight filtered through layers of leaves. The shifting patterns created moving patches of light upon the ground. A breeze passed through. The leaves responded with a soft whisper. Somewhere nearby, a bird called. Then another answered. The world seemed perfectly content. No rush. No noise. No demand. Only the slow unfolding of an ordinary afternoon. After a time, Brother Matthew stood once more. The basket still waited. The fallen branches still needed collecting. The work continued. And so he resumed his gentle walk through the orchard. The sun had begun a slow journey toward the western sky. Though many hours of daylight remained, the afternoon was gradually moving forward. The shadows lengthened little by little. The light softened almost imperceptibly. The day continued its steady rhythm. Brother Matthew knew that later the bell would call the monks again. More prayers would follow. Then evening tasks. Then supper. Then the peaceful arrival of night. But those moments still lay ahead. For now, the orchard remained a world of leaves, sunlight, birdsong, and patient trees. A quiet place where time seemed to move a little more slowly. A place where an ordinary afternoon could feel almost endless in its calm. And beneath the shade of the old fruit trees, the gentle story of the day continued. The afternoon drifted onward. In the orchard, sunlight continued filtering through the leaves. The shadows beneath the trees slowly stretched across the grass. The air remained warm, though the fierce brightness of midday had begun to soften. Brother Matthew carried his basket of fallen branches toward the edge of the orchard. The task had taken longer than expected. Not because there had been much work. Simply because there was no reason to hurry. The monastery measured its days differently than many places. The hours were not something to race through. They were something to live within. As he walked, he glanced back toward the rows of trees. The orchard looked peaceful beneath the afternoon sky. Birds still moved among the branches. The leaves whispered softly whenever the wind passed through. Soon the fruit would ripen. Harvest season would arrive. The monks would gather apples and pears into baskets. The storehouses would fill. The kitchens would become busy. But for now, the trees simply continued growing. Quietly. Patiently. The way they always had. Brother Matthew followed the path back toward the main buildings. The monastery stood calmly beneath the sunlight. Its stone walls had watched countless afternoons like this one. The same warm light. The same drifting clouds. The same slow passage of time. As he entered the courtyard, he heard a familiar sound. Tap. 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 A hammer striking wood somewhere nearby. The sound came from the workshop. Brother Matthew smiled slightly. The workshop was one of the livelier places in the monastery, though even there the atmosphere remained calm. Many things needed repair throughout the year. Tools wore down. Furniture loosened. Doors creaked. Handles cracked. Nothing lasted forever. The workshop existed to care for these everyday needs. Brother Matthew crossed the courtyard and approached the building. The workshop stood near the outer wall. Its large wooden doors remained open to allow sunlight and fresh air inside. The scent reached him before he entered. Fresh wood, sawdust, linseed oil. A faint trace of metal from tools resting on workbenches. It was a comforting smell. The smell of things being maintained rather than discarded. Inside, several monks worked quietly. Sunlight poured through open windows and illuminated floating particles of dust. Wood shavings covered parts of the floor. Neatly organized tools hung upon the walls. Everything had a place. Everything was cared for. Brother Peter stood near one workbench. He was repairing a wooden stool. The stool had probably served the monastery for many years. Its legs had become loose. Its surface showed signs of wear. Yet rather than throwing it away, Brother Peter patiently restored it. His hands moved slowly and carefully. Every motion reflected experience. Nearby, another monk sharpened gardening tools. The steady scrape of metal against stone filled one corner of the room. The sound was repetitive, almost soothing. A rhythm all its own. Brother Matthew stepped inside. The cooler air felt pleasant after the warmth of the orchard. He placed the basket of branches near a storage area where wood was kept for future use. Even fallen branches could serve a purpose. Some would become firewood. Others might be used for repairs. Nothing useful was wasted. The monastery valued simplicity. Part of that simplicity involved caring for what already existed. Brother Matthew wandered slowly through the workshop. A wooden wheel leaned against one wall. A half-finished shelf rested nearby. Several baskets waited to be repaired. Each object told a small story. Each carried evidence of daily life. History often survives through grand buildings and famous documents. Yet ordinary objects reveal much about how people truly lived. A stool. A bucket. A wheelbarrow. A wooden spoon. These humble things accompanied people through countless ordinary days. And ordinary days made up most of life. Brother Matthew paused beside a window. Outside, sunlight illuminated the courtyard. A pair of monks crossed the open space carrying sacks of grain. The sight reminded him of how interconnected monastery life truly was. The farmers harvested grain. The millers ground it into flour. The bakers transformed the flour into bread. The monks shared that bread at meals. Every task supported another. The community functioned because many small efforts combined into one larger whole. Inside the workshop, Brother Peter continued working. The repaired stool was beginning to take shape. His hands tightened a wooden peg. Then he tested the leg carefully. Satisfied, he nodded to himself. The stool would likely serve for many more years. Brother Matthew admired that. There was something comforting about repair. Something hopeful. A damaged object did not necessarily need to be abandoned. With patience and care, it could continue serving its purpose. The same idea often appeared throughout monastery life. Patience. Care. Steady effort. Again and again. These simple values shaped much of the daily routine. A faint breeze entered through the open doors. The smell of fresh cut wood drifted through the room. Somewhere outside, a bird sang briefly before falling silent. The workshop remained peaceful. Busy, but peaceful. Productive, but calm. Time passed gently. The sun moved lower. Its light entering the workshop gradually changed. The bright white glow of midday softened into warmer shades of gold. Long shadows stretched across the floor. The floating dust particles shimmered in the sunlight like tiny sparks. Brother Matthew watched them for a moment. They drifted slowly through the air. Almost weightless. Almost motionless. Then he moved toward a small workbench near the back of the room. Several damaged book clasps rested there. Metal pieces used to keep manuscripts securely closed. The library occasionally sent such items to the workshop for repair. Brother Matthew picked one up. The hinge had loosened. Nothing serious. Just another small task waiting to be completed. He sat down and began working carefully. The workshop settled into its afternoon rhythm. The scrape of tools. The tap of hammers. The rustle of wood shavings. None of the sounds felt harsh. Each blended into the calm atmosphere. Outside, the afternoon continued unfolding. Clouds drifted slowly across the sky. The orchard rested beneath lengthening shadows. The herb garden basked in warm sunlight. The kitchens prepared for the evening meal. Every corner of the monastery moved steadily toward the end of the day. Brother Matthew focused on the clasp in his hands. A small repair. Nothing remarkable. The kind of task history books rarely mention. Yet tasks like these filled countless days throughout the centuries. Ordinary work performed by ordinary people. Quiet labor that allowed communities to function. The clasp finally fit properly once again. Brother Matthew tested it carefully. Satisfied, he placed it aside. One small repair completed. One small contribution to the larger life of the monastery. The afternoon light grew softer. The warmth of evening could already be felt approaching. Soon another bell would ring. The monks would gather again. Prayer would once more bring the community together. But for now, the workshop remained filled with the peaceful sounds of careful hands at work. Wood. Metal. Sunlight. Patience. And the steady rhythm of another ordinary day within the monastery walls. The kind of day that might seem small from a distance. Yet from within, it contained an entire world of quiet moments. And as the golden light continued spilling across the workshop floor, the story of the day moved gently toward evening. The afternoon slowly leaned toward evening. Inside the workshop, the sunlight had changed completely. The bright light of midday was gone now. In its place came a softer glow, rich with shades of gold and amber. Long shadows stretched across the wooden floor. The tools hanging on the walls cast dark shapes that reached farther than before. Brother Matthew set aside the repaired clasp. For a moment, he simply sat quietly. The workshop had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Brother Peter continued smoothing a piece of wood with careful strokes. Another monk organized tools along a shelf. No one seemed eager to finish. No one watched the clock. The monastery followed the movement of bells, sunlight, and prayer rather than numbers on a page. Outside, the world was changing. The afternoon warmth remained, but evening could already be felt approaching. The air carried a slightly different quality. A gentleness. A softness. The kind that often arrives near the end of a long summer day. Brother Matthew stood and stretched his shoulders. The workbench had served him well. The repaired clasp now rested beside several others waiting to be returned to the library. Soon the books they protected would once again sit securely upon their shelves. Small tasks often disappeared into the larger life of the monastery. Few people noticed them. Yet they mattered. The monastery depended upon countless quiet acts of care. He stepped toward the doorway. Outside, the courtyard glowed beneath golden sunlight. The stone walls seemed warmer in color than they had earlier. The sky remained clear except for a few clouds drifting slowly toward the horizon. Birds crossed overhead. Their dark shapes moved briefly across the bright sky before disappearing. For a while, Brother Matthew stood in the doorway and watched. He enjoyed this hour. Many monks did. The day was not yet over. Work remained unfinished. Yet evening had already begun whispering its arrival. The world seemed calmer, slower, as though preparing for rest. Then, from high above the monastery, a familiar sound rolled through the air. The bell. Its voice was deep and steady. One note. Then another. Then another. The sound drifted across the courtyards. Across the gardens. Across the orchard and nearby fields. Even the distant hills seemed to receive its message. Evening prayer approached. The monks began setting aside their work. Tools returned to shelves. Workbenches were tidied. Doors were gently closed. The workshop gradually emptied. Brother Matthew joined the small stream of monks moving toward the church. Their robes shifted softly as they walked. The courtyard felt peaceful beneath the golden light. The shadows of the buildings stretched long across the ground. The herb garden glowed softly in the evening sun. Lavender flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The orchard beyond the walls rested quietly. Its leaves sparkled whenever sunlight touched them. Everything seemed touched by gold. As Brother Matthew entered the cloister, he noticed how different it looked from earlier. The arches now framed the evening sky. Sunlight entered from a lower angle, creating beautiful patterns across the stone floor. The courtyard grass shone brightly. Small birds hopped among the shadows. The air felt cool beneath the covered walkway. Comfortable. Refreshing. For centuries, countless monks had crossed this cloister at the same hour. Evening after evening. Season after season. The thought felt comforting. One life connected gently to another. One generation following the path of those who came before. The church doors stood open. Inside, warm light filled the space. The sun shone through the western windows. Colorful reflections danced across the stone walls where small pieces of stained glass caught the light. The church looked almost transformed. Morning had brought gray shadows. Now evening brought gold. Brother Matthew found his place. The other monks settled quietly around him. Gradually, silence filled the room. Outside, the bell's final echoes faded into the distance. Only stillness remained. Then the prayers began. The voices rose together. Soft. Measured. Peaceful. The familiar words drifted upward toward the wooden beams overhead. The sound filled the church without disturbing its calm. Brother Matthew listened carefully. The prayers felt different in the evening. Morning prayers often carried a sense of beginning, of preparation for the day ahead. Evening prayers felt gentler, more reflective. The work of the day was nearly complete. The community had gathered once again. The hours between dawn and sunset had been filled with many small tasks. Books copied. Gardens tended. Tools repaired. Meals prepared. Countless ordinary moments. Now the monastery paused to reflect before night arrived. The sunlight continued changing as the prayers progressed. The golden beams grew deeper in color. The shadows lengthened. The bright sky beyond the windows slowly softened. The world outside seemed to be exhaling, relaxing after a long day. When the prayers finally ended, the silence that followed felt especially peaceful. No one moved immediately. The church remained still. Brother Matthew glanced toward one of the windows. The sun now rested low above the horizon. Its light painted the landscape in warm colors. The fields beyond the monastery glowed softly. The tops of distant trees shimmered. Even the stream seemed brighter where the sunlight touched its surface. Eventually, the monks rose. The evening meal awaited. The dining hall carried familiar scents. Fresh bread. Vegetable soup. A small portion of cheese. Simple food. Comforting food. The tables filled slowly. The meal began much like the others. Quietly. Respectfully. A reader stood once more at the front of the hall. His calm voice flowed through the room while the monks ate. Outside the windows, the sky continued changing. Gold slowly blended into orange. Orange softened toward pink. The colors reflected briefly upon the stone walls before fading. Brother Matthew enjoyed these moments. The peaceful meal. The fading sunlight. The feeling that another ordinary day had unfolded successfully. Nothing dramatic had happened. No great event had occurred. Yet there was satisfaction in that. The gardens had been cared for. The orchard had been tended. The workshop had remained productive. The library had preserved its books. The monastery had continued its quiet work. Sometimes peace itself was enough. After the meal ended, several monks helped clean the hall. Others stepped outside to enjoy the final light of day. Brother Matthew found himself drawn once more toward the courtyard. The sky above had become even softer now. The first hints of evening blue appeared high overhead. Near the horizon, warm colors still lingered. Birdsong had begun to fade. The breeze felt cooler. Night was slowly approaching. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But gently. The way evening always arrived here. One small change at a time. And beneath the deepening sky, the monastery settled into the peaceful hours before darkness. The day was not yet finished. But its busiest moments were behind it now. Ahead waited quiet reflection, fading light, and the calm arrival of night. The evening continued its slow and peaceful descent. After the meal, the monastery seemed to grow quieter with each passing moment. The sounds of work had faded. The clatter of tools was gone. The voices of the readers in the dining hall had fallen silent. Now there was only the gentle transition between day and night. Brother Matthew stood in the courtyard. The last traces of sunlight rested upon the highest parts of the monastery walls. The warm gold of evening was fading little by little. Shadows gathered in corners where light had once reached. Above him, the sky stretched wide and calm. Near the horizon, soft shades of orange and rose still lingered. Higher up, deepening blue slowly spread across the heavens. The first evening star appeared. Small. Steady. Quiet. Brother Matthew noticed it immediately. Many monks became skilled at observing such things. Their lives followed natural rhythms. The movement of the sun. The changing seasons. The appearance of stars. These details often became companions throughout the years. A cool breeze crossed the courtyard. The warmth of the afternoon had finally disappeared. The air now carried the fresh scent of grass, stone, and distant earth cooling after a long day beneath the sun. Brother Matthew breathed deeply. The monastery felt especially peaceful during this hour. Daytime responsibilities had mostly ended. Nighttime silence had not fully arrived. The world existed between two states. Neither day nor night. A brief and beautiful moment in between. He began walking slowly toward the cloister. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor. The familiar arches stood dark against the fading sky. The courtyard grass at the center had lost its bright green color and now appeared almost silver beneath the dimming light. A few birds made their final flights of the day. One disappeared into the branches of a nearby tree. Another settled somewhere beyond the monastery walls. Soon they too would become silent. As Brother Matthew walked beneath the arches, he noticed a young monk seated on a bench. Brother Lucas, one of the newest members of the monastery. Still learning the routines. Still becoming familiar with the quiet rhythm of life here. The young monk sat peacefully, watching the sky. Brother Matthew offered a gentle nod as he passed. Brother Lucas returned it with a small smile. No words followed. None were needed. The silence felt natural. Comfortable. The cloister had always been a place where silence seemed to belong. The stone walls encouraged reflection. The covered walkways softened every sound. Even the wind seemed quieter here. Brother Matthew continued walking. The arches framed different views of the evening sky as he moved. One arch revealed a patch of fading orange. Another revealed the deepening blue overhead. A third showed the silhouette of a distant tree. The changing views reminded him of pages in a book. Each arch revealing a slightly different picture. Each step offering something new to notice. At one corner of the cloister stood a small iron lantern. Its flame had already been lit. The warm light flickered softly behind thin pieces of glass. The lantern was not bright. It did not need to be. Its purpose was simple. To provide a small circle of comfort as darkness approached. Soon more lanterns would be lit throughout the monastery. Their warm glow would replace the fading sunlight. For centuries, evening had arrived this way. First the sunset. Then the lanterns. Then the stars. A familiar sequence repeated countless times. Brother Matthew paused beside one of the arches and looked toward the church. A monk carrying a lantern crossed the courtyard. The small flame swayed gently with each step. One by one, points of warm light began appearing around the monastery. A lantern near the dining hall. Another beside the library. A third hanging beneath a covered walkway. The stone building slowly emerged from the darkness in small patches of golden light. The effect was beautiful. The monastery seemed to glow softly against the deepening evening. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The sound drifted through the cooling air. Night creatures were beginning to awaken. Day creatures were settling down. The world shifted quietly from one rhythm to another. Brother Matthew resumed walking. The cloister now felt different than it had an hour earlier. The fading light softened every edge. The shadows became deeper. The sounds became fewer. Each passing minute carried the monastery closer toward nighttime silence. Eventually he reached a doorway leading into the church. Inside, several candles already burned. Their flames danced gently. The stone walls reflected warm amber light. The church felt smaller at night. More intimate. More enclosed. The high ceiling disappeared into darkness above. The bright windows of daytime became dark shapes. Brother Matthew entered quietly. A few monks were already seated. Each appeared lost in peaceful reflection. No one hurried. The final prayers of the day were still some time away. This was simply a quiet period before gathering together once more. Brother Matthew chose a seat near one of the candles. The small flame flickered steadily. Its light illuminated the nearby woodwork. For a while he simply sat, listening. The church possessed its own kind of silence. A deep silence. A silence that seemed to absorb every sound. Occasionally he heard a faint creak from the wooden benches. or the distant movement of wind outside. Otherwise, nothing disturbed the stillness. His thoughts drifted gently through memories of the day. The cold darkness before dawn. The library filled with sunlight. The herb garden. The orchard. The workshop. Simple moments. Ordinary moments. Yet together they formed the shape of a complete day. The monastery was built upon such days. Not grand events. Not dramatic stories. Just countless ordinary days woven together across years and generations. One peaceful day following another. The evening deepened further. Outside, darkness slowly settled across the countryside. The fields disappeared into shadow. The stream could still be heard, though it could no longer be seen. Stars multiplied overhead. 1 became 5. 5 became dozens. The night sky unfolded quietly above the monastery. Soon the bell would ring again. One final time before sleep. The monks would gather. Prayers would rise softly through the candlelit church. Then the monastery would surrender itself to the peaceful silence of night. For now, however, the world remained still. Lanterns glowed. Candles flickered. The air cooled. And Brother Matthew sat quietly within the ancient church, listening to the calm heartbeat of another ordinary evening. The day was drawing to a close. Very slowly. Very gently. Exactly as it always had. Night had fully arrived. Outside the monastery, darkness rested gently across the countryside. The fields had disappeared beneath shadows. The orchard was now only a collection of dark shapes beneath the stars. The nearby stream continued its steady journey through the land, though its waters could no longer be seen. Above everything stretched the night sky. Countless stars shimmered quietly. They seemed brighter now than they had earlier. Far from busy towns and distant lights, the heavens revealed themselves clearly. The stars watched over the monastery just as they had watched over countless generations before. Brother Matthew remained seated in the church. The candle beside him flickered softly. Its small flame created moving shadows across the nearby stone wall. Other candles glowed throughout the room. Together they pushed back the darkness just enough to create a feeling of warmth and comfort. The church was peaceful. Very peaceful. The final moments before the last prayers of the day often felt different from any other time. The work was finished. The meals were over. The sunlight was gone. Nothing remained except reflection and rest. One by one, more monks entered the church. Their footsteps were soft. Their movements calm. Nobody seemed hurried. The entire monastery appeared to be slowing down. Like a stream approaching a quiet pool. Like a breeze gradually becoming still. Brother Matthew watched as Brother Thomas entered and took a place nearby. The younger monk looked tired. Not exhausted. Simply satisfied after a full day. Many of the monks carried the same expression. The kind that comes from honest work and familiar routines. At last, the bell rang. Its sound echoed through the night. Deep. Slow. Gentle. The final bell of the day. Its voice drifted beyond the monastery walls and out into the sleeping countryside. Then silence returned. The monks bowed their heads. The final prayers began. Soft voices filled the church. The words moved through the darkness like a calm river. No one spoke loudly. No one rushed. The familiar prayers unfolded at their own steady pace. Brother Matthew listened carefully. He always found comfort in these moments. Morning prayers welcomed the day. Evening prayers prepared the soul for rest. They formed two quiet bookends around all the ordinary hours in between. As the voices rose and fell, the candlelight continued dancing upon the walls. The church seemed almost timeless. It could have been this night, or a night many years earlier. The same stone, the same prayers, the same gentle rhythm. The final words eventually faded. Silence followed, deep and complete. The monks remained seated for a few moments. Nobody moved. The stillness felt sacred. Outside, a faint wind brushed against the monastery walls. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once. Then quiet returned. The prayers had ended. Now another tradition began. The great silence. From this moment until morning, conversation would cease. The monastery would enter a period of complete quiet. Words would rest. Voices would sleep. Only essential sounds would remain. Footsteps. Doors opening softly. The distant wind. The night itself. Brother Matthew appreciated the great silence. It created a peaceful ending to each day. A gradual transition into rest. A chance for the mind to settle completely. The monks rose slowly. Without speaking, they began leaving the church. The candles continued burning behind them, their small flames glowing in the darkness. Brother Matthew stepped outside. The cool night air greeted him immediately. The temperature had dropped since sunset. The breeze felt refreshing against his face. Above him, the stars shone brilliantly. He paused for a moment and looked upward. The sky appeared endless. A river of stars stretched from horizon to horizon. Many monks spent years observing the heavens. Not as astronomers. Simply as quiet witnesses to the beauty of creation. Brother Matthew stood beneath the stars for several moments. No words. No thoughts demanding attention. Just stillness. Then he continued walking. The cloister was almost completely silent now. Lanterns glowed beneath the arches. Their light created small islands of warmth surrounded by darkness. The stone floor reflected the flickering flames. Each footstep echoed softly. Nothing more. The monastery seemed to breathe slowly. Calmly. Peacefully. Brother Matthew crossed the courtyard. The herb garden rested quietly beneath the stars. The orchard beyond had become a dark silhouette against the night sky. Everything that had been busy during the day now slept. The bees. The birds. The workers. Even the leaves seemed more still. The path eventually led toward the sleeping hall. A lantern burned beside the entrance. Its golden light illuminated the wooden door. Brother Matthew stepped inside. The hall was dim. Several monks had already arrived. Some prepared their beds. Others sat quietly for a few final moments of reflection. Nobody spoke. The great silence had begun. The room carried the familiar scent of wool blankets, wood, and cool stone. A peaceful scent. The scent of rest. Brother Matthew walked to his bed. The same simple bed that had greeted him at the beginning of the day. How long ago that morning now seemed. The darkness before dawn. The bell. The prayers. The library. The gardens. The orchard. The workshop. The sunset. All of it now belonged to memory. Another complete day had passed. A day much like countless others. And yet unique in its own quiet way. He folded his robe carefully. Order mattered, even in small things. Then he sat upon the edge of the bed. The hall had grown even quieter. One by one, lanterns were extinguished. A flame disappeared. Then another. Then another. Each time, the darkness deepened slightly. Soon only a faint glow remained near the doorway. Moonlight entered through the narrow windows. Its pale silver light stretched across the floor. The stars remained visible outside. Brother Matthew lay down beneath his blanket. The wool felt warm against the cool air. His body relaxed immediately. The work of the day had left a pleasant tiredness. Not exhaustion. Simply the natural fatigue that follows honest labor. Around him, the sleeping hall settled into stillness. Occasionally a blanket rustled. Occasionally a bed creaked softly. Otherwise, silence ruled the room. Outside, the night continued. The stream flowed. The wind moved gently through the trees. The stars crossed slowly overhead. The monastery rested beneath the moonlight. Safe. Peaceful. Quiet. Brother Matthew closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring another bell before dawn. Another walk through dark corridors. Another day of prayer, work, sunlight, and simple tasks. But tomorrow had not yet arrived. For now, there was only this moment. The calm darkness. The cool night air. The peaceful silence of the sleeping monastery. And so the ancient stone walls stood quietly beneath the stars, holding within them a community at rest, while the night slowly unfolded around them, hour by hour, beneath the endless sky. The monastery slept beneath the stars. Hours had passed since the final prayers. The candles in the church had long since burned low. The lanterns in the cloister had been extinguished. The workshops, library, kitchen, and dining hall all rested in darkness. Night held everything gently. The stone walls stood silent beneath the moonlight. The orchard rested beneath the branches of sleeping trees. The herb garden lay quiet beneath the cool air. Even the wind seemed softer now. Brother Matthew slept peacefully in the sleeping hall. Around him, rows of simple beds stretched through the darkness. Moonlight entered through the narrow windows and painted pale silver shapes across the floor. The room was still. Very still. Only the quiet sound of breathing could be heard. Outside, the stars continued their slow journey across the sky. Most people slept through these hours. Yet the world never truly stopped. The stream beside the monastery continued flowing. The grass continued growing. Clouds drifted across distant horizons. Time moved steadily onward. The moon gradually crossed the heavens. Its light shifted slowly across the monastery grounds. The shadows changed. The angles softened. The night deepened. Then, little by little, it began to change once more. Far beyond the eastern hills, something almost impossible to notice was happening. The darkness was becoming slightly less dark. Not enough for anyone to see immediately. Not enough to wake the sleeping birds. But the change had begun. A new day was quietly approaching. The stars nearest the horizon started to fade. One by one. Slowly. Patiently. The moon sank lower. The cool air carried the scent of damp earth and dew. In the orchard, tiny drops of moisture gathered on leaves. In the herb garden, silver beads of dew formed along stems of rosemary and lavender. The entire landscape seemed to be holding its breath. Waiting. Inside the sleeping hall, Brother Matthew remained asleep. His blanket rose and fell gently with each breath. The peaceful tiredness from the previous day had carried him easily into rest. There had been no excitement. No urgency. Only the simple rhythm of monastery life. And now that rhythm prepared to begin again. Hours earlier, the monks had moved through their evening routines. Now those memories belonged to yesterday. A fresh day waited just beyond the darkness. The first bird awakened. It was only one. A small sound in the distance. A brief note carried through the night air. Then silence returned. A few moments later, another bird answered. The sounds were faint, almost hesitant, as though the world itself was slowly waking. The eastern horizon softened into dark gray. The stars continued disappearing. The outlines of distant trees became slightly easier to see. The monastery walls emerged gradually from the darkness. Shapes returned to the landscape. Not suddenly. Very slowly. The way dawn always arrives. Brother Matthew stirred beneath his blanket. Not fully awake. Just shifting slightly. Years of routine had trained his body to recognize the approach of morning. The bell had not yet rung. But some part of him already sensed the coming day. The sleeping hall remained quiet. Most of the monks continued resting peacefully. Outside, the first faint breeze of morning moved across the fields. It touched the leaves of the orchard. It brushed through the herb garden. It crossed the monastery courtyard. The air felt fresh and cool. A promise of another calm day. The eastern sky brightened further. Gray became pale silver. Silver slowly hinted at blue. The world was still mostly dark. Yet night was clearly retreating. The first details of the landscape appeared. The shape of the church tower. The outline of the cloister arches. The roof of the library. The wooden gate leading toward the orchard. All emerged quietly from the shadows. Inside the sleeping hall, Brother Matthew opened his eyes. For a moment he simply lay still. The room remained dim. Moonlight had almost disappeared. The new light of dawn had not fully arrived. This brief period between night and morning always felt special. The monastery seemed suspended between two worlds. Yesterday had ended. Today had not yet fully begun. Brother Matthew listened carefully. Silence. Then a distant bird. Then silence again. He sat up slowly. The wool blanket slipped from his shoulders. The cool air immediately touched his skin. The stone building still carried the chill of the night. Nearby, another monk stirred. Then another. The first signs of waking life appeared throughout the room. No one spoke. The great silence technically continued until morning prayers. The quiet remained complete. Brother Matthew folded his blanket neatly. The motion felt familiar. Comforting. A task performed thousands of times. Yet still worth doing carefully. The small routines mattered. They gave shape to the day. One simple action leading naturally into another. He stood and walked toward the narrow window. Outside, dawn continued spreading across the landscape. The sky now carried shades of pale blue and soft gray. The stars had nearly vanished. Mist drifted above the nearby stream. The fields appeared calm and night was still resting over the land of Egypt. The world felt clean. Fresh. Ready. Brother Matthew rested his hand against the stone window frame. The surface felt cool beneath his fingers. For a moment he simply watched the changing sky. The same sky he had watched countless times before. Yet every dawn carried its own beauty. No two mornings were exactly alike. Some arrived beneath clouds. Some beneath rain. Some beneath brilliant colors. Today arrived quietly. Gently. Without fanfare. The monastery remained peaceful. The bell had not yet sounded. The church still waited in silence. The library stood dark. The kitchens had not yet begun preparing breakfast. The gardens rested beneath dew-covered leaves. Everything seemed paused, waiting for the familiar signal, waiting for the beginning. Then, from somewhere deep within the monastery, a figure climbed the narrow steps of the bell tower. A monk whose duty included ringing the bell. His lantern cast a faint glow against the stone walls as he ascended. Above him waited the great bell. Patient, silent, ready. Brother Matthew could not see this happening, but he knew it well. The same routine repeated every morning. The same careful climb. The same steady hands. The same bell. Outside, the horizon brightened a little more. The birds became slightly more active. The monastery stood poised between stillness and motion. Between sleep and wakefulness. Between darkness and light. And then, at last, the first deep note of the morning bell rolled across the sleeping countryside. The sound drifted through the cool dawn air. Across the fields. Across the stream. Across the orchard. Across the monastery walls. A new day had begun. And once again, the timeless rhythm of the monastery moved gently forward. The bell continued ringing through the morning air. Its deep voice rolled across the countryside, touching fields covered in dew and drifting over the quiet stream beside the monastery. The sound felt familiar, steady, and comforting. For generations, people had awakened to this bell. Its voice had marked the beginning of countless ordinary days. Days of prayer. Days of work. Days that slowly became years. Inside the sleeping hall, the monks rose from their beds. The room remained quiet. The great silence was ending, but no one felt the need to rush into conversation. Morning carried its own kind of peace. Brother Matthew finished dressing and joined the others moving toward the corridor. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor. The building still held the coolness of the night. Small lamps glowed in a few corners, though dawn was already beginning to brighten the windows. The monastery seemed to awaken one room at a time. One hallway. One doorway. One quiet footstep after another. Brother Matthew walked beneath a stone archway and entered a corridor leading toward the church. The familiar path required little thought. He could have followed it with his eyes closed. Years of routine had carved the route deeply into memory. The same walls. The same floor. The same turns. Yet every morning felt slightly different. Today carried the scent of damp earth after a cool night. A faint breeze moved through the open passageways. The sound of distant birds drifted through the air. Outside, dawn continued unfolding. The eastern sky had become pale blue. Thin streaks of silver cloud stretched across the horizon. Mist still floated above the stream. The orchard appeared soft and dreamlike beneath the early light. The leaves of the fruit trees sparkled with dew. The herb garden glistened quietly. Every leaf seemed decorated with tiny drops of water. The world looked fresh, renewed, as though it had been carefully washed during the night. Brother Matthew entered the church. Inside, several candles burned near the front. Their warm glow mixed with the cool blue light of dawn entering through the windows. The combination created a peaceful atmosphere. Neither night nor day seemed fully present. The church existed somewhere between them. The monks quietly took their places. Wooden benches creaked softly. Robes rustled. Then stillness settled over the room. Brother Matthew sat and folded his hands. The stone walls surrounding him felt ancient. The ceiling disappeared into shadow above. Everything seemed calm, unchanging. Yet beyond the windows, the sky continued brightening. The day moved forward whether anyone noticed or not. The prayers began. Soft voices rose together. Gentle. Measured. Steady. The familiar words drifted through the church. Brother Matthew listened carefully. Morning prayers always felt like opening a door. Not a dramatic door. Not a grand gate. Simply a quiet doorway leading into another day. The voices blended together beautifully. No one voice dominated. The community prayed as one. Their words echoed softly from the stone walls before fading into silence. Outside, the first rays of sunlight touched the highest parts of the monastery. The church tower caught the light first. Then the roofs. Then the upper branches of nearby trees. Slowly the sunlight descended toward the ground. The transformation happened almost unnoticed. Inside the church, the prayers continued. The candles flickered gently. Dust floated through beams of growing light. The darkness retreated little by little. Morning was arriving. When the prayers ended, a peaceful silence filled the room. No one moved immediately. The stillness felt comforting. Like a calm lake untouched by wind. Brother Matthew glanced toward one of the narrow windows. The sky beyond had become brighter. The blue deepened. The clouds glowed softly. Another clear day seemed likely. Eventually the monks rose. The first prayers of the new day were complete. Now breakfast awaited. The dining hall slowly filled with the warm scent of fresh bread. Some things rarely changed. Every morning the kitchen awoke before most of the monastery. Bread baked. Porridge simmered. Water heated. Simple food prepared by patient hands. Brother Matthew entered the hall with the others. Sunlight now reached the windows. Golden beams stretched across the wooden tables. The room felt warmer than before. More awake. The monks took their seats. At the front stood the reader. A familiar figure holding a book. As breakfast began, his calm voice filled the hall. The tradition remained unchanged. The monks listened while they ate. Brother Matthew broke a piece of bread and listened to the reading. The words flowed steadily through the room. Outside, birds moved through the courtyard. The monastery was fully awakening now. The kitchens bustled quietly. The workshops waited. The gardens awaited tending. The library awaited its scribes. Every part of the monastery prepared for another day of simple labor. Brother Matthew enjoyed this moment. The beginning of a new day always carried possibilities. Not dramatic possibilities. Not adventures. Simply the unknown collection of small moments waiting ahead. Perhaps a manuscript would finally be completed. Perhaps the orchard would need attention. Perhaps a tool would require repair. The details remained uncertain. The rhythm remained familiar. Breakfast ended gradually. Bowls emptied. Bread disappeared. The reader closed his book. The meal concluded with quiet gratitude. Then the monks rose. The day now truly stood before them. Brother Matthew stepped outside into the courtyard. The sunlight had reached the ground. Warm golden light rested upon the grass. The dew sparkled brilliantly before slowly evaporating. The herb garden released its fragrance into the morning air. Lavender. Mint. Rosemary. Sage. The scents blended together beautifully. Nearby, a pair of sparrows hopped along a stone wall. The stream could be heard beyond the monastery grounds. The sound felt brighter now than it had during dawn. The entire world seemed awake. Brother Matthew stood quietly for a moment. The sky stretched overhead in shades of blue. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. The bell tower cast a long shadow across part of the courtyard. Soon that shadow would shorten as the sun climbed higher. The day would continue. Morning would become afternoon. Afternoon would become evening. Evening would become night. Then another dawn would arrive. The rhythm never stopped. It simply flowed onward. Like the stream beside the monastery. Like the seasons. Like time itself. For now, however, the day remained young. The library awaited. The gardens awaited. The workshops awaited. And Brother Matthew, standing in the fresh morning sunlight, felt the quiet satisfaction of beginning another peaceful day within the ancient stone walls of the monastery. The story of this new day had only just begun. And many gentle hours still lay ahead. The morning sunlight spread steadily across the monastery grounds. The long shadows cast by the bell tower and church slowly shortened as the sun climbed higher. Birds moved through the orchard, and the herb garden released fresh fragrance into the warming air. The new day was underway. Brother Matthew crossed the courtyard at an unhurried pace. The breakfast meal now belonged to the past. Ahead waited the quiet work of the morning. The library stood on the eastern side of the monastery, just as it had the day before, and the day before that, and for many years before Brother Matthew had ever arrived. Its stone walls appeared warm where sunlight touched them. Its windows reflected the bright sky. The building seemed peaceful, patient, as though it had been waiting quietly through the night for the return of its caretakers. Brother Matthew reached the familiar wooden door. The handle felt smooth beneath his hand. Thousands of touches over many years had polished the wood. He pushed gently. The door opened with a soft creak. Immediately, the familiar scent welcomed him. Old parchment. Leather bindings. Wooden shelves. A faint trace of ink. The smell never changed very much. Brother Matthew found comfort in that. Some scents become connected to memory. The library's scent reminded him of countless peaceful mornings. Of sunlight on parchment. Of quiet concentration. Of patient work. The room was already awake. Several monks had arrived before him. One sat near a window examining a manuscript. Another organized books upon a shelf. A third carefully prepared fresh ink. The sounds were gentle. The turning of pages. The movement of chairs. The faint scratch of a quill. Nothing disturbed the silence. The library possessed its own rhythm. Different from the kitchen. Different from the gardens. Different from the workshop. Here, time seemed to move more slowly. Sunlight entered through tall narrow windows. Golden beams stretched across the floor. Tiny particles of dust floated through the light like drifting snowflakes. The effect was beautiful. Almost dreamlike. Brother Matthew walked toward his desk. The manuscript he had been copying remained exactly where he had left it the previous day. The unfinished page waited patiently. Its blank section seemed almost expectant. Ready to receive the next lines. He sat down. The wooden chair felt familiar. Comfortable. A simple tool shaped by years of use. Before beginning, he paused for a moment. The room felt especially peaceful this morning. Perhaps it was the clear weather. Perhaps it was the sunlight. Or perhaps it was simply one of those mornings when everything seemed calm. Outside the windows, the world continued moving. But inside the library, silence ruled. Brother Matthew reached for his quill. The feather felt light in his hand. Beside it rested a small container of ink. Dark. Smooth. Ready. He dipped the tip carefully. Then he lowered the quill to the parchment. The work began. One letter. Then another. Then another. Slowly. Carefully. Patiently. Every stroke mattered. A careless movement could spoil a page that had required many hours to complete. The monks who copied manuscripts developed steady hands. Not because they were naturally gifted. Because practice taught patience. Day after day. Year after year. Brother Matthew often enjoyed the simplicity of this work. The task required attention. But not worry. The world narrowed to a manageable size. The parchment. The ink. The words. Everything else faded gently into the background. The scratching sound of quills gradually filled the room. Several scribes worked at once. Their combined efforts created a soft rhythm. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Pause. A peaceful pattern repeated over and over. Sunlight slowly shifted across the floor. Time moved quietly. Brother Matthew copied another line. Then another. The manuscript contained familiar teachings. Words preserved through generations. Words copied countless times by countless hands. Each scribe became part of a long chain. One person preserving knowledge for the next. The thought pleased him. No single monk could preserve everything. But together, across centuries, they carried stories and ideas forward. A breeze entered through a partially open window. The fresh air stirred loose pages resting on a nearby desk. The leaves of a tree outside rustled softly. Then the breeze passed. The silence returned. Brother Matthew continued working. Occasionally he paused to stretch his fingers. Or to compare his work with the original manuscript beside him. Accuracy mattered. Patience mattered. Both required time. The monastery understood this. Not everything valuable could be rushed. The herb garden required seasons. The orchard required years. The manuscripts required steady attention. Everything worthwhile seemed connected to patience. As the morning advanced, the library grew brighter. The sunlight spread farther across the room. The candles that had been lit earlier became unnecessary. One by one they were extinguished. Natural light now filled the space. Brother Matthew glanced toward a nearby shelf. Rows of books rested there. Some had been copied recently. Others were old enough that no one remembered the names of the monks who had created them. The books waited quietly. Each one containing the thoughts of people long gone. Yet their voices remained. Preserved in ink. Preserved in parchment. Preserved through careful labor. The idea felt almost magical. Not magical in a grand sense. Simply wonderful. A person could disappear from the world. Yet their words could continue traveling through time. Brother Matthew returned his attention to the page. The letters continued appearing. Line after line. Page after page. The work felt steady. Comforting. Outside, the monastery grounds filled with activity. Gardeners moved among herbs. Workers crossed the courtyards. The kitchens prepared for later meals. The orchard basked beneath the growing warmth of the sun. Life unfolded throughout the monastery. Yet the library remained a place apart. A quiet island of concentration. The hours passed. The sunlight warmed the stone walls. The birds outside sang occasionally. The scratching quills continued their gentle conversation with the parchment. Brother Matthew finally completed the page. He sat back slightly. The final line looked neat. Orderly. Complete. A small sense of satisfaction settled within him. One page finished. Many more remained. Yet every manuscript was completed the same way. One page at a time. One line at a time. One careful stroke at a time. The lesson seemed true for many things in life. Large tasks became manageable through small steady efforts. Brother Matthew smiled faintly. Then he turned the page and prepared to begin again. The morning still stretched ahead. The bell for midday remained distant. The library remained peaceful. And the gentle work of preserving words continued beneath the growing sunlight. Outside, the world brightened. Inside, the scribes worked quietly. The day flowed onward. Steady as the nearby stream. Calm as the drifting clouds above the monastery. And beneath the warm light pouring through ancient windows, another chapter of ordinary monastery life unfolded with patient grace. The morning continued unfolding beneath a clear blue sky. Inside the library, sunlight now filled nearly every corner of the room. The golden beams that had stretched across the floor earlier had shifted again, moving slowly with the passage of the sun. Brother Matthew completed another section of the manuscript. The fresh ink glistened briefly before drying. For a moment, he rested his hand and looked out the nearby window. Beyond the glassless opening, the monastery grounds glowed beneath the growing warmth of the day. The herb garden stood out immediately. Its neat rows of green plants seemed almost luminous in the sunlight. Lavender swayed gently. Sage spread its soft gray-green leaves. Mint grew thick and healthy in carefully tended beds. The sight reminded Brother Matthew of another task waiting for attention. The library would remain here. The manuscript would wait patiently. But the herbs required care while the morning remained cool. He carefully set aside his quill. The unfinished page could rest until later. Like many tasks in monastery life, manuscript work often shared the day with other responsibilities. A monk's life rarely involved doing only one thing. The rhythm of the monastery encouraged variety. Prayer, study, labor, reflection. Each had its place. Brother Matthew rose from his desk and quietly left the library. The moment he stepped outside, fresh air greeted him. The difference was immediate. The library smelled of parchment and ink. Outside smelled of grass, earth, and sunlight. Birds moved among the trees. The breeze carried the scent of growing plants. The entire monastery seemed alive. The path toward the herb garden wound between stone buildings. Brother Matthew followed it slowly. Along the way, he passed Brother Thomas carrying an empty basket. The younger monk was heading toward the same destination. The basket itself explained the task. Harvesting herbs. The monastery relied heavily upon its garden. Many of the plants served practical purposes. Some flavored food. Some eased pain. Some soothed coughs. Some helped wounds heal. The knowledge had accumulated slowly across generations. One monk teaching another. One gardener teaching the next. The wisdom grew little by little. Like the plants themselves. The garden gate stood open. Brother Matthew stepped inside. Immediately, the fragrances surrounded him. Rosemary. Thyme. Lavender. Mint. Dozens of scents blended together. The air itself seemed alive with fragrance. Sunlight illuminated the rows of plants. Bees drifted lazily between blossoms. Butterflies moved from flower to flower. The garden hummed softly with life. Near the center stood Brother Gregory. He was one of the oldest monks in the monastery. His back had begun to bend slightly with age. His beard was almost entirely white. Yet his knowledge of herbs was remarkable. Few people understood the garden as well as he did. Brother Gregory had spent many years caring for these plants. Many younger monks sought his guidance. Not through formal lessons. Mostly through observation. Through quiet hours spent working beside him. Brother Matthew approached. The older monk was examining a row of medicinal herbs. His weathered hands moved gently among the leaves. Careful. Respectful. Almost as though greeting old friends. The plants responded by releasing their fragrance. The morning sunlight rested warmly upon the garden. Everything seemed peaceful. Brother Matthew selected a basket and began gathering herbs from a nearby section. The task required attention. Some leaves needed harvesting. Others needed more time. A careless hand could damage the plant. Patience remained important. As always, he carefully cut several stems of mint. The fresh scent immediately filled the air around him. Nearby, Brother Thomas harvested rosemary. The younger monk worked steadily. The basket beside him slowly filled with fragrant branches. The sounds of the garden were gentle. The buzz of bees. The rustle of leaves. The occasional chirp of birds. Nothing else. No loud voices. No sudden noises. Just the quiet music of a peaceful morning. Brother Matthew often enjoyed working here. The garden encouraged observation. A person naturally noticed small things. The shape of a leaf. The color of a flower. The movement of insects. The warmth of sunlight upon the skin. Such details often went unnoticed elsewhere. But here they felt important. The herb garden taught patience and attention. Two qualities valued throughout monastery life. As the morning advanced, the baskets gradually filled. Some herbs would travel to the kitchen. Others would be dried and stored. A few would be prepared for medicinal use. Monasteries often provided basic care to travelers and local villagers. The monks could not cure every illness. But they did what they could. Simple remedies. Simple comfort. A soothing tea. An herbal salve. A warm place to rest. These small acts mattered. Brother Matthew thought about this while harvesting another bundle of mint. Many people arrived at monasteries carrying burdens. Sometimes physical burdens. Sometimes worries. Sometimes grief. The monks could not solve every problem. Yet they could offer kindness. A meal. A bed. A listening ear. The herb garden played a small role in that tradition. The plants growing here sometimes helped ease suffering. That knowledge gave additional meaning to the work. The morning sun climbed higher. The coolness of dawn faded completely. Warmth settled across the garden. The bees became more active. The fragrances seemed even stronger. Brother Matthew carried a basket toward a shaded table where harvested herbs were sorted. Several monks worked there. They separated plants into neat bundles. Each bundle destined for a specific purpose. Cooking. Medicine. Storage. Nothing was wasted. Every leaf had value. The monastery lived simply. Resources were respected. Brother Matthew placed his basket upon the table. The scent of fresh mint rose into the air. Nearby lay bundles of lavender. Their fragrance drifted softly through the shade. For a moment he paused and looked around. The garden looked beautiful. Rows of green plants stretched beneath the sunlight. The stone walls surrounding the space reflected warmth. Butterflies floated lazily above the flowers. The entire scene seemed calm enough to last forever. Of course, nothing lasted forever. Summer would eventually become autumn. The flowers would fade. The leaves would fall. Winter would arrive. Then spring would return. The cycle would begin again. The garden reminded everyone of this truth. Growth. Rest. Renewal. Again and again. Year after year. Brother Matthew appreciated that rhythm. It mirrored the rhythm of the monastery itself. Days followed one another. Seasons followed one another. Generations followed one another. Everything moved forward calmly. Steadily. Without hurry. A bell sounded faintly in the distance. Not the great bell. A smaller one. A reminder of passing time. Brother Matthew listened for a moment. The day continued advancing. Midday would arrive eventually. Then afternoon. Then evening. Yet there was still much of the morning remaining. The garden remained bright and peaceful. The baskets continued filling. The herbs continued growing. And beneath the clear summer sky, the monks quietly carried on their work among the fragrant rows of plants. The story of the day moved forward once again. One small task at a time. One gentle hour after another. Within the shelter of ancient stone walls and beneath the warmth of the sun. The morning sun continued climbing through the sky. The herb garden shimmered beneath the growing warmth of the day. Bees moved from blossom to blossom. The scent of lavender and mint drifted through the air. Brother Matthew carried another basket of freshly harvested herbs toward the sorting table. The work had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cut. Gather. Sort. Repeat. Simple tasks often created the most peaceful hours. The monastery seemed content in its routine. The library remained busy. The workshop echoed with quiet labor. The kitchens prepared for the midday meal. The orchard rested beneath the sunlight. Everything unfolded exactly as expected. Then, from somewhere beyond the monastery walls, a sound interrupted the familiar pattern. Not a loud sound. Not an alarming one. Simply the creak of a gate opening. Brother Matthew glanced toward the far side of the courtyard. Others looked as well. Visitors were not unusual. The monastery stood beside an old road that crossed the countryside. Travelers occasionally passed through. Some arrived seeking food. Some sought shelter. Others simply requested directions or a brief rest. The monks welcomed them whenever possible. Hospitality was an important part of monastery life. A stranger arriving at the gate was treated with kindness. No one knew what journey he might have endured. No one knew how far he had traveled. Brother Matthew set down his basket and began walking toward the courtyard. Several other monks continued their work. Only a few needed to greet the visitor. The monastery's routine would continue. As he crossed the grounds, he noticed Brother Paul approaching the gate as well. Brother Paul often handled matters involving guests. He possessed a calm and gentle manner that put people at ease. The gate stood open now. Beyond it stretched a dusty road disappearing into the countryside. Beside the entrance stood a traveler. He appeared tired. Not dangerously exhausted. Simply worn from many days of walking. His cloak carried dust from the road. A leather bag hung from one shoulder. The man's boots showed clear signs of use. Travel in the medieval world was rarely easy. Roads could be rough. Journeys could take weeks. Weather often determined progress. Brother Matthew paused a respectful distance away. Brother Paul greeted the traveler warmly. The conversation remained quiet. The visitor removed his hat and bowed his head slightly. His posture suggested both politeness and relief. Finding a monastery at the end of a long day's walk often brought comfort. The traveler looked around the grounds. His eyes moved across the gardens, the church tower, and the stone buildings. Many visitors reacted similarly. The monastery felt peaceful. Different from villages. Different from crowded markets. Different from busy roads. The calm atmosphere often became noticeable immediately. Brother Paul listened as the traveler explained his situation. The man had been walking for several days. He hoped to continue his journey tomorrow. For now, he simply needed food, water, and a place to rest. Nothing more. Such requests were common. The monastery maintained a small guest house for travelers. Simple rooms. Simple meals. Nothing luxurious. Yet after days on the road, even modest comfort could feel wonderful. Brother Paul smiled and nodded. The traveler visibly relaxed. The tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. Brother Matthew always appreciated moments like this. Small acts of kindness often mattered greatly. A warm meal. A safe bed. A place protected from weather and uncertainty. These things could transform an exhausting journey. The traveler followed Brother Paul through the gate. His footsteps sounded slow and heavy. The road had clearly demanded much from him. As they crossed the courtyard, several monks offered polite nods. The visitor returned them gratefully. The monastery never felt crowded. Yet it rarely felt isolated either. The wider world occasionally entered through the gate. Travelers carried stories from distant regions. News from other towns. Descriptions of places many monks would never see. Such visitors offered brief connections to the world beyond the monastery walls. Brother Matthew resumed walking toward the herb garden. The traveler was now in good hands. Brother Paul would show him the guest house. Water would be provided. A meal would follow later. The monastery knew this routine well. Returning to the garden, Brother Matthew found the morning unchanged. The herbs still swayed gently. The bees still hummed among the flowers. The sunlight still warmed the earth. The brief interruption had already blended naturally into the rhythm of the day. He picked up another basket. Nearby, Brother Gregory continued sorting medicinal herbs. The elderly monk's hands moved carefully among the leaves. Years of experience guided every motion. Nothing hurried. Nothing wasted. Brother Matthew joined the work once more. As he harvested rosemary, he found himself thinking about the traveler. What roads had he walked? What villages had he passed through? What weather had he endured? The answers remained unknown. And somehow that felt appropriate. Many travelers passed through monasteries. Some stayed only one night. Some remained several days. Then they continued onward. The road carried them away again. Their stories briefly touched the monastery before disappearing into the wider world. The monks rarely learned everything about them. Nor did they need to. Offering kindness did not require complete understanding. The thought stayed with Brother Matthew as he worked. The herb garden seemed especially peaceful now. Perhaps because somewhere nearby, a weary traveler was finally resting. The monastery existed partly for moments like that. Not only for prayer and study, but also for service. For providing comfort where comfort could be given. The morning advanced steadily. The baskets filled. The shadows shortened. The warmth increased. Somewhere in the guest house, the traveler likely drank fresh water and enjoyed a chance to sit down. Meanwhile, the life of the monastery continued. The library remained quiet. The workshops remained busy. The gardens remained fragrant. The church remained peaceful. Every part of the community moved forward together. Brother Matthew carried another basket toward the sorting table. The scent of mint and lavender surrounded him. Above, clouds drifted slowly across the blue sky. The day felt calm, balanced, whole. And within the ancient walls of the monastery, one more traveler had found a brief refuge from the long roads of the medieval world. The bell for midday had not yet rung. There was still time before the next prayers. Still time for work. Still time for sunlight. Still time for the gentle unfolding of another ordinary day. And so the morning continued, quiet and steady, beneath the watchful tower of the monastery and the endless sky above. And so, for now, we leave the monastery in the warmth of that quiet morning. The traveler has found shelter behind the ancient stone walls. The herb garden continues to sway gently beneath the sun. The library remains filled with patient scribes. The kitchen slowly prepares the next meal. Somewhere, a bell will ring again, just as it always has. Brother Matthew carries on with his ordinary duties. There is no great adventure waiting for him. No dramatic event approaching on the horizon. Only another peaceful hour. Then another. And another after that. The monastery was never built around extraordinary moments. Its life was made from small things. The sound of footsteps in a stone corridor. The scent of fresh bread drifting through the halls. The turning of pages in the library. The quiet work of hands in a garden. The fading light of evening upon old walls. These simple moments filled the days. The days became months. The months became years. And the years slipped gently into memory. Outside the monastery, roads continued stretching across the countryside. Travelers came and went. Seasons changed. Leaves appeared and fell. Snow arrived and melted away. Yet within the walls, the familiar rhythm endured. Prayer. Work. Silence. Rest. Again and again. Like the flowing stream beside the monastery. Like the steady turning of the seasons. Like the rising and setting of the sun. As the morning light brightens the courtyard and the birds sing among the orchard trees, Brother Matthew disappears quietly into the routine of another ordinary day. The herb garden remains fragrant. The church remains still. The bell tower stands watch beneath the sky. And somewhere beyond the walls, a gentle breeze moves through the fields. Nothing more is needed. The story does not end with a grand conclusion. It simply settles into silence. Like evening light fading from a stone wall. Like the last note of a distant bell. Like a peaceful day slowly becoming a peaceful memory. And beneath the endless sky, the monastery remains calm, quiet, and at rest. Crescent moon.